So I came into ceramics quite late. I started off doing engineering design for a degree way back in the 80s, and then became a teacher of DT, which is like woodwork and metalwork and plastics. When I found pottery, I was first of all doing general pottery, and then I specialised in animals, and I made animals quite a lot, and I went to quite a few shows. I was an artist in residence for Bird World near Farnham, and had quite a few galleries that stocked the work, but I thought, well, I need to go and do something else. And I went to City Lit in London, where they do a ceramics diploma over 2 years, and it was just amazing. It was like having my head turned inside out with thinking, I need to use the ceramics to say something. So it was all about what to say after that. I came to realise what I wanted to talk about was upbringing, because I'd been a teacher, because I had trained in an engineering-based degree, and I was the only girl in 300 blokes who were at the graduation when I left. I never thought it was much of a thing, but I did feel that that was down to upbringing and how much we're shaped by upbringing, and I was shaped by my dad having me in his workshop doing practical things all the time. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to use the kind of methods and the observational skills, I guess, that I'd acquired doing animals, and transferred it onto looking at childhood. I always say, well, I make figurines because it's a traditional object. It's just a traditional thing that people would have in their houses, but it's also where people look at a girl is a beautiful object that goes on a mantelpiece, and so I'm making ones that totally disagree with that. I came up with this particular method really during lockdown, and I was already making little figures but making them in all separate sections, but I feel like that was quite a stiff way of working. I wanted it to be more fluid, because everything is about how they stand, has got to tell the story. It's all about stance. So I've started off doing this where I just get paper drinking straws and kitchen roll and masking tape and wooden kebab sticks. The reason I do that is so that then it's already hollow. So there's no hollowing out that I have to do. All of it goes straight in the kiln. Because it's paper, as the clay shrinks, by that point all the paper has gone mushy and it just lets it go. It'll just shrink with it and it all burns out in the kiln. The other part of it is having this foam or polystyrene block, and I stick the wooden skewers into it, which go inside the legs, because I think it's very important to build them standing up, because I want to look at proportions and they look different when they're down on a desk. For my work, it's important to me that I use porcelain, because there is a tradition of a porcelain figurine. It's the most difficult thing to use for sculpture of any kind, so I really would advise you to use a nice ordinary stoneware. First of all, I'm going to start off with just covering it in clay and quite loosely drawing into it with my fingers. The hip line will change a little bit depending on the age of the child, but it's always going to be that the knees are halfway between the hip and the ankle. So I will mark those out and measure them with something, usually, just to make sure, because it's very easy to get the knees in the wrong place and then everything looks a bit odd. I also put a number of markers that I'm looking at when I make a figure. Certain things you want to see. So you want to see the indent at the back where the spine would be, and you want to see the little dimples at the above the bottom, and you want to see that the knees get fatter and not thinner. People often squeeze in for knees, whereas actually the knees are bigger. It's just about observing. It's taking a very simple structure and building onto it, and you can keep layering on clay or taking it off until it gives you what you want. So the arms are solid. I'll make a nice shoulder socket to put the arm in so that they're secure, and it gives me a nice rounded shape around the top of the arm where it joins the shoulder. Because they are such tiny figures, generally for these very small ones, I don't divide up the fingers because they would be too small and too fragile. You never get them in the kiln. I use cast doll faces. This is because it's all about upbringing and it's referencing childhood, and it's also the other indicator of this is what you're meant to look like, this beautiful doll. So people do look at it and they find that unnerving. Sometimes it's in the form of a mask and they only have one eye hole out, but they've got two eyes behind, just like these that I'm making here. It's just that one eye looks at what other people see on the other side of the mask, but they look at what's behind the mask with the other eye. One of my favourite bits is adding hair, because you can suddenly get all the movement. Lots of mine have little bobbed haircuts because it's a fairly universal 1950s, 1970s child look, but you can also introduce a lot of movement. And I have a variety of cake forks, which are the perfect tool for making hair because you can really sweep them through the wet clay. For the demo here, and when I go and do workshops with people, I'm using this method of more robust clothes. When I make my own, I sew tiny outfits to fit everybody, and I mix a special slip, and I have another mix of paste to support it. We're doing it this way because, again, it works really well with stoneware. You pick up all of the textures of the fabric. You're still making clothes to fit, but you're not burning them off in the kiln. You're peeling them off afterwards. So I'm just cutting clothes to fit. Really, really thin layers of clay rolled out, roll the fabric onto it and dress her up. I would normally put the clothes on when she's gone a little bit harder anyway, so leather hard, and then it's easier to put the clothes on because you're going to be pressing quite a lot into the figure to make your folds. Then you could just leave it there until it's dry and peel off the fabric before it goes in the kiln. All of my figures are porcelain. Some of them are porcelain and then they are layered up with oxides and then more porcelain slip to give a cracked surface, because it's like all is not as it seems and it's not so beautiful under the surface. I do use a lot of gold luster and I just love it, this alchemy. What I aim to do, I think I'm trying to get people's memories. I think I'm trying to prompt ideas in other people about either their upbringing and how they react, especially with the masks. That does prompt a lot of talk about how and why we use masks and whether they can be a strength, because that's how we want to present ourselves, or it might be a burden if people do not want the mask that they feel they've got to present. I find all of that very interesting, but I do also do some that are less challenging. I quite like a bit of misdemeanor going on, really, and a bit of rebellion, which I think is means they're quite true to themselves.